Hello, today I'm going to talk about a library that's becoming more popular. It's called GetX. It has things like state management, key value store pairings, navigation, snack bars, and toast. And it has a few more things too. But today we're going to talk about the biggest reason to use it, and that is the state management aspect. So if you go to the docs for GetX, you can see here, this is the main page. It has a few of the things I mentioned. It also has theming, validations here. But yeah, we're going to focus on the state management part. So if you go to the state management part here and you go down to the bottom, this link here, you'll get an entire page just for state management. And it's a pretty long page, as you can see. So they do a very good job with their docs, like a very, very good job. My goal is to teach you the state management aspect as quickly as I can here. So let's go back to the code. And I created a little app that could be something like a restaurant. So you have a name here. I just call it Pizza Shack. You have a number of followers for the restaurant. You have a flag saying if it's open or closed. I created a section here for followers and a section here for reviews. This could be like a restaurant dashboard here. And if you go to the drawer here, I have a few different options. I want us to be able to change the restaurant name, add or remove followers, increment or decrement the follower count, toggle the status to open or closed, add, remove reviews for the restaurant, and update the menu. So I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of this. If you want to skip over this part, that's fine. But in the main here, I have the home, edit, add followers, toggle status, etc. screens here. And in the home screen, I have a list, I have a single child scroll view with column, info cards. So I have 3 info cards. I created these as separate widgets just to save some space. There's a lot of code that already exists in this app that I created. So I wanted to kind of separate things out a little bit. So card info widget, you can see here we have the card widget and we have the title text here. So this general followers and reviews section is part of this column. Okay. And I also have a rounded input for, let's go to our add reviews. So you can see this is the rounded input and I have this in several different screens. So change name to. And I have the side drawer here too with all of our drawer items. Okay, I'm not going to go through all these other screens right now, but I want to put this code up on the GitHub repo as it is now. And then I'm going to put up a separate branch with the finished code. So you can kind of walk through with the video and do it yourself too. So once again, this code as it is now with no state is actually going to be put onto the GitHub repo in a separate branch as the finished code. So I'm going to go to the home screen and let's look at the info card for the name. So we have general as the title here, and we have Pizza Shack here, and followers 0 and text open. So we want these 3 things to be set by the user, and we want to store these 3 things in a state object. So first, I'm going to create a new folder called controllers, and then I'm going to create a new controller and call it restaurant controller. Okay, and if you go to the docs here, you can see that the first thing that we want to do with state, we'll get into these variables here soon, but the first thing you want to do is create a class that extends GetX controller. So keep in mind that GetX controller is not a widget. So when we create this, we're not extending a widget. You'll see why that's important later. Okay, so let's do class. I'm going to call it restaurant controller extends GetX controller. And I've already added that to the pub spec here. So you can see we have get here. Okay. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to define all my variables for this restaurant. I'm actually going to create variables for different types so you can see how you would actually handle the types. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is create observables. So if you're not familiar with observables, I encourage you to research that on your own. I'm not going to get too much into that. We want to create final variables. So I want to say final name equals, and then we actually want to initialize this name here. So I'm going to say Pizza Shack. And this last part is what you have to do with GetX. You say .obs. So this returns a rx string with this initial value here. Okay. So this is the basic way how you define an observable with GetX. And you can see here, they've done the same thing up here too. We're not going to use all these, but we're going to use most of these. Okay. So I'm going to say final follower count equals 0 by default. So 0.obs, and then do one for the flag is open. So final is open. So this will be a boolean. So you would define the true or false state. So true.obs, and then final follower list equals. So this would be the follower list here. So I'm actually going to define that as an empty array first. So let's do empty array.obs. And then finally, I want to do a map to demonstrate how to use a map with GetX. So I'm going to do that for the reviews here. I'm going to have a name and a review. So it'll be 2 strings. So I'm going to say final reviews equals, and then I'm going to define it as 2 strings. So string, string, and then the default value would be a empty map.obs. Okay. So these are probably the 5 most common variable types that you'll use in your app. So that's why I chose these types here. And now in your GetX controller, you have a few different functions that you can override. You can override the init. So we can say on init, and we'll come back to this later. Now, how do we actually set these variables? So you cannot set these directly because final is or name is a final variable, right? And it's an rx string, it's not a string. So in order to do this, it's actually pretty simple. You would define a function. I'm going to call it set name, and then I'm going to pass in the string that we want to assign to it. So I'm going to say string resto name, short for restaurant. Now we actually want to set the observables, or we call it the same here. So we say name, and this is a rx string. So we can set the rx string directly by doing parentheses, and then we just put in that string name. Okay. So this actually sets this string to this observable value. So it's not setting the name rx string, it's setting the value of the rx string itself, which can change. Okay. So now let's go back to our code over here, and I'm going to go, actually before I do that, let's change this to pizza cabin so we can see the change. So pizza cabin. Then let's go to the home screen, and up here, in order to see an observable as it changes or as the initial value, you need to wrap it in a widget called Obx. So Obx is from the GetX library. You say Obx, and then you pass in whatever widget that you want to set. So you always want to wrap a single widget with Obx. So now we can put that inside here. Okay, so now this Obx has wrapped this text. As it is now, this doesn't really do anything. So we actually need to tell it which observable values that we want to use. And that is inside of our restaurant controller. But we need access to that controller first, right? So let's go up here to our build, and I'm going to say final restaurant controller equals, and now we actually need to find that controller. So to do that, you say get, and then you say dot find. So this looks for a particular controller that we want to assign to this controller here. And this should actually be lowercase, so lowercase. And let's actually shorten this to just save some space. Call it resto controller. So get dot find, and then you need to tell it which type here. So find of type restaurant controller, and then we just put the parentheses here, and that's it. So get looks in your app for this particular controller. assigns that GetX controller to this value here. Hope that makes sense so far. So now let's use this inside of our Obx widget. So down here, instead of Pizza Shack, we're going to say resto controller dot, and we have name here, so name. But remember, name is not a string, name is a RX string. So in order to get the value, we just say dot value. And then we save, and let's reload. And let's go up here. Restaurant controller not found. You need to call get.put restaurant controller. This means that we're not telling the app to register that controller. So in order to use a controller in your app, you need to register it first. So let's go to the main, and I'm going to get rid of the arrow function. Okay, and take this and return that here instead. And then here, I want to do get.put restaurant controller. Okay, and that's it. So now this app knows that it has a restaurant controller that it needs to register. Restart. I forgot to save, so let's restart. And now you can see we have Pizza Cabin here instead of Pizza Shack. So that means that our restaurant controller.name.value is here. But that doesn't mean that our Obx is working. So we want to test this too, right? So let's go to the edit name screen. So here, I want to change the name, and when we submit this text box, I want to have the name change here and on the home screen. Okay. So the code right here right now is pretty simple. It's just a rounded input. Restaurant name on submit, we just submit, or we just print the value here. So do this, and now you see the value printed down here. Okay. When we submit, I want to call that set name that we had here. Okay. Let's copy. So while we're here, I want to save some space here. I want to put this inside of our controller, and you'll see this pattern a lot in the docs too. So we want to say static restaurant controller, and then I want to make a getter for that. So I want to say get, and you can call this whatever you want to. In the docs, they call it to, so I'm just going to call it to. And then we want to just paste that into here. Okay, so instead of calling get.find controller every time we want to find a controller, we can just call that controller.to. It'll save some space. It'll make it so we don't have to search for this in this manner every time. So let's go back to the home. I'm just going to say restaurant controller.to. Okay, so I'm going to copy and paste this into the edit name screen. Let's import that. And now instead of the name here, I want to put the actual name from the controller. So for that, again, we want to wrap this in Obx. So Obx, same syntax. Let's import. And then I want to say resto controller dot name dot value. Let's reload. You can see it says Pizza Cabin. So the cool thing about Obx is that it only updates this widget if this value changes. So if you change other values inside of this controller, this doesn't care, and this will not change. If only name is changed, this will get rebuilt, and the rest of this screen will not get rebuilt. Only this particular widget will get rebuilt when this name changes, which is pretty awesome. So now we actually want to call that set name function. So let's go down here. Now we don't need this Obx here because we're not actually listening for it. Let's say resto controller dot set name. Oops. Here. So let's do resto controller dot set name, and we just pass in that value. Let's save, and let's try something here. Burger Queen, and then press return. We see Burger Queen has been set, but it has not been updated here. So let's actually reload. Let's go back to the name. Let's say Burger Queen. Okay. And now it's been changed to Burger Queen. So keep in mind, you might have to restart. So now we see that here. Let's go back to our home screen. And we see Burger Queen here too. So whenever you want to listen for the name change in your entire app, you just wrap any widget that wants to use that name with Obx. And then you listen for the name from the controller. Very, very simple stuff. I love GetX a lot. Okay, let's go back to our controller. And now I want to write the rest of these functions to alter the value of these Rx objects up here. Okay, so let's go down here. And now I want to do one for the follower count. So I want to say increment count. I'm just going to say follower count. And then we pass in the value that we want to set. So I want to say the current follower count dot value, which is an int because we define it as an int here. It knows which Rx value or which Rx type of object to map here to these. Rx list, Rx bool, Rx int. So we say follower count dot value plus 1. And now I want to decrement. So let's do decrement. Similar concept here, follower count dot value minus 1. The boolean is pretty simple. We just do set is open, and then I want to pass in the boolean value. So bool open, and then let's say is open set to open. Okay, and now we get into more of the complicated data structures up here. So we have our list here and our map. So to update the list, I want to create a function called set follower list. So this will actually set the entire list. We might not use this one, but it's good to know how to do it anyways. So let's do set follower list of type string. And then we can pass in the list here. And then we can say follower list. So in order to update the follower list, we cannot do it the same way as here. If you do try to do it, we'll see. And it'll say that it cannot evaluate to a function. So in order to update the list, it's actually not that bad. We do dot. So you can actually use the same functions that you would use on a normal list, mostly. For this, I want to say assign all. So assign all will overwrite all of the existing items with the new list. And that's it. And next I want to add a single follower. So let's add follower. And then for here, I want to pass in the follower name, a string name. And then do follower list. And now here, I just want to do dot add. So dot add name. Now I want to remove a follower. So let's do remove follower. And then I want to pass in the index that I want to remove. So I want to say int index. And then I want to say follower list dot remove. So you can use any of these if you want to. You can pass in a condition. You can say last, etc. But I just want to do remove at. Keep it simple. And now I want to handle the reviews. So the reviews are a map, an Rx map. Let's go down here. I want to add a review. So I want to pass in the name and the review. So pass in string name and string review. And then to add it to the reviews, you do reviews. So similar to the follower list, you cannot just do this. We want to do dot add, and then we pass in the key value pair, which is the name and review. Very similar to what you would do with a normal map. And next I'm going to do remove review. And then I want to remove the review by the key name, which is the name. So I want to pass in the name and do reviews dot remove name. Okay, pretty simple stuff. I love how organized things can be when you use your controllers correctly. In this app, we only have one controller right now, and it's controlling all of the data on this one screen here. And we can actually set these values once we actually implement that. So we have set name done. So let's go to the count screen. So let's go to edit follower count. That'll be this here. So right now I have these two buttons. They don't do anything right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to add our controller. You'll start to see a pattern here as we go along. So let's copy this into our edit follower count Okay, let's import that. And now instead of 0 here, I want to put RESTful controller dot follower count dot value, which is an int. And then you cannot have an int here by itself, so you need to put to string. And to make sure that this value is updated when we change the count, let's set that as an OBX. So OBX, and then we just assign it to this. Make sure we import that here. Save, reload. So now we actually want to increment and decrement the value when we press these buttons here. That's pretty simple. We can just do resto controller dot follower count. We want to set the actual count. So let's do dot decrement, and down here we can do resto controller dot increment. Pretty simple stuff. And let's go to the home screen and let's do something similar here with the count. So we'll wrap this in OBX. So let's do OBX. Let's do resto controller dot. Now we want to observe the count. So we do follower count dot value and then dot toString. Okay, so let's go back to the count screen. And actually, let's go back to the home screen. I forgot to change the string back. So let's do string with followers, and then we'll use that variable here. And forget this. Okay, now let's restart. Oops, I put it in the wrong section. Okay, it should be here. Okay, restart. Now let's go back to the count screen. Now let's change the value. So up, 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 down, down, down. Let's put it on 6. Let's go back to the home screen. And you can see that we have 6 followers now. So pretty cool stuff, very easy. I'm not checking for negative values, so we can still go below 0, which is fine. I just want to show you how easy that is to change the counts, like increment and decrement a value. You see 11 here. So we have that. Now let's go to the toggle status, and we want to show either open or closed here. Now we just show open. So again, I want to copy and paste this resto controller, put it into the toggle status, import. Let's go to that screen and see how it looks. All we have is a text here saying, is it open? So let's go to the switch, and I want to observe the state of the toggle button here, or of that value, the boolean value. So let's wrap this in the OBX. You know the drill. OBX. Okay, and when we change this switch, I want to set that is open function to true or false based on the value. So that's pretty simple. We could say resto controller dot set is open to value. And this value here is set to false by default. I want this value to be whatever that is open flag is. So let's do resto controller dot is open is the boolean name, or the RX bool name. So is open dot value. Very simple stuff. So let's restart. Let's go back to the toggle status, and you can see that it is true, but we don't actually know if it's working or not, right? So let's go back to our home screen. So here we have open. So now I want this to be whatever that is open flag is. So let's wrap this in the OBX. Okay, and instead of open here, I want to say resto controller dot is open dot value. Let's put a condition here. So let's say open dot value. So if this is true, we'll have a ternary operation. We'll say if it's open, then I want to show the text open. Else, I want to show the text closed. Oops. Yeah, we're already inside the text view. So let's just put these values here. Okay, that's a lot better. So let's save, reload. So now it says open. So let's go back to the toggle status. Now let's change it to close. So close. Let's go back. And now we can see it says closed. And let's do one more thing just to make this look a little bit better. Let's use the same condition here and say if it's open, use green, else use red. And this should be a question mark, not a colon. Okay, so let's restart. Now you can see that it's closed is red and open is green. Okay, that looks better. Okay, now we're going to go to the followers, which is not quite as simple. So let's go to the add follower screen, and you can see we have a list view with 5 items. Let's go here. You can see follower 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I want to update this list of followers when we enter a new follower here. So this is a widget that will be listening for the list, for the follower list. So first let's wrap this list in an Obx. Okay, and I want to add that same controller to our add followers. So let's do that up here. Let's get rid of this, put that here. So I want to create a new tile for our data. I want it to be a little bit more functional. So let's actually change the tile here, keep the text here as a title. But now I want this to be controller dot follower, or sorry, it should be resto controller, resto controller dot follower list. And now we actually want to show that list follower name based on the index. So this is a list, so we just do brackets index. Okay, and up here with the item count, now we don't have a set number of items. So up here we need to do resto controller dot follower list, and then we get the length of that list. So dot length. Okay, so this takes care of listening for the follower list and the list view itself. So up here with our rounded input, we're passing in the onSubmit, right? Now I want to call our add follower function from our controller. So let's do controller resto controller dot add follower, and then we just add the value. Okay, so let's restart. Let's go back to our followers here. Now this list is empty, which is what we expect. Let's try to put a name in here and see what happens. And now you can see that our add follower name here is correct. So we actually were able to add the follower here. So we're still not showing it on the home screen, right? So let's go back to the home screen, and we need to update the followers. So down here, followers card. So for this list view, you could probably guess I'm going to use Obx and listen for that value with the list view. And instead of saying John here 3 times, I'm going to put in the actual follower list from the index. So you actually need to use the $ here for that to actually get that value. So we do $ bracket, and then we say resto controller dot follower list, pass in the index, close brackets. So let's restart. Okay, so this error is actually not very helpful to see what the problem is here, but I noticed it right after I ran it. I just forgot to update the item count. So we say 3 here. So right now we actually don't have 3, we have 0. So this is not a constant number here. So we need to do the same thing that we did before on the other screen. We need to say resto controller dot follower list dot length. Okay, so let's restart. And now you can see we have no followers here, which is what you expect. Okay, so let's go back to our add follower screen. And let's add a bunch of names here. Tom, Casey, Mika. And let's go back to the home screen. And now you can see we have those 3 names here. Okay, that actually wasn't too bad, right? It's not really that big of a deal to update a list compared to primitive variables. So yeah, keep in mind that you would wrap your entire list view in Obx, not just the list tile here. Okay, so for the last part of this, we're going to update the reviews. So let's go to the review screen. So this screen is a little bit different because this one has two inputs. So let's go to the rounded input widget real quick. So we have the text field here with all these other parameters here. Now I want to actually add something to this. So I want to be able to get the values from these. So this video assumes that you know how to use text editing controllers to get the values of a text input. We need to do that because we want to set the review from both of these values at the same time. Okay. And we're also going to add a button here, which is something I probably should have done before, but it's not a big deal. So we're going to pass in a final text editing controller and just call it editing controller. And then this one is not going to be required. So I'm just going to say this dot editing controller. And then down here, set the controller field to that editing controller. So again, I'm assuming that you already know how to do this for a text field, but here we're just passing it into a custom widget that we have for our text input. Okay. So saving that, let's go back to the add review screen, define our editing controller. So I want to say final name input controller equals text editing controller. And let's copy and paste this and call this one review input controller. And now down here, I want to set the controller, the editing controller field to name input controller. And down here, set that to review input controller. Okay. And now I want to put a button here. I'm going to leave some room here. So I'm going to say sized box and do a height of, let's do 16. And now I want to put a flat button here. The child of that would be a text. And let's just say submit for that. Submit. So let's do unpressed. So now for the unpressed, we're going to submit the review with the name and the review string. We have our controller. Actually, we don't yet. So let me add that. Resto controller. Let's import that and put that here. So do resto controller, and we defined our add review. So we could say add review, and we pass in the name and review, but those will be part of the editing controllers. So we can get our name input controller here, name input controller dot text. Similar for this one, we could say review view input controller dot text. So that sets the state of our review list by adding a new review based on the input controller text for both of these fields here. Okay, so down here, we don't want to do this anymore. So I want to wrap this in an Obx. Okay, so now this is listening for nothing yet, actually. So let's define our item count first. So let's do resto controller dot reviews. So this is a map, right? So reviews dot length. Okay. Okay, and now for this list tile, I'm going to change things a bit. I want to get the entry of the map. So instead of getting the review name first and then the review value second, I want to just get the entire entry. So above our list tile here, I'm going to get the entry. So to do that is pretty easy. You say map entry. So an entry is a map value keep here. So map entry, let's call it review entry, equals controller, resto controller, dot reviews, dot entries. And then for this, it's of type iterable map entry string. For that, we want to get the element. Since it is iterable, we could say dot element at index. Okay, so reviews dot entry dot element at index. Okay, and the map entry, as I said, is a key value pair. So now for the list tile, instead of just a text for the tile, I want to put this inside of a column. So I want to show the name and then review underneath it for each tile. So let's do column children. And then I want to have two text views. So one text view, or one text, one text will be reviews entry, and it'll be the key, which is the reviewer name. And then I want to have the text review entry dot value, which is the actual review itself. Okay, hope that makes sense. We rep that in Obx, so we're listening for this review. So this entire Obx only cares about the REST controller dot reviews. So if anything else changes, this won't get touched. Show the key and value in a column. While we're here, let's copy and paste. You could probably just create your own widget and import that into both places, but I want to save time for the video and put it into the home screen here. So instead of home, reviews, let's do that here. So let's view and to here. I know that looks pretty messy. Let's see if we can clean this up a little bit here. So column, infocar, Obx, and then we wrap that list view around the list view. This is a lot of widgets. We could probably clean this up a little bit, but let's see what we can do here. Side drawer, container, edge insets, single child scroll view. Actually, we can get rid of, let's copy this padding. We can get rid of this container here. We don't need this because we can add our padding to the single child scroll view here. And then let's get rid of one of these. That's a little better, but that should do for now. Okay, so we have our reviews. Let's reload. So now our reviews are empty, our followers are empty. Let's go to our review screen, and we have our button here. I want to change the button a little bit. So let's go to reviews. Let's go to our flat button, and I want to change the color. Let's add some color to this. Let's do colors, colors dot deep orange. Let's make the text white. So let's do style, text style, colors dot white. And let's make this stretch the entire length of the inputs here. Doing that is actually pretty easy. We need to go to the column up here and make sure that this is all stretched out. So let's do cross-axis alignment, and stretch is how you actually stretch the children across the entire screen. So stretch. Okay, that looks better. Okay, so let's add a review. Let's say Julian, and let's say good food, and press submit. We can say Julian, good food. Okay, pretty easy. So let's add one more. Let's go random name, Nancy. Let's say too salty. Now we have two reviews here. Let's go back to our home screen. And now you can see we have two reviews here too. So it says Julian, good food, Nancy, too salty. We could justify things here to the left, but this is fine for now. I'll probably play around with the UI a little bit after the video is done. So that handles all of the different variables inside of our restaurant controller here. We handled updating the state for name or for strings, for ints, for booleans, list, and maps. So I also created a update menu thing here. I'm gonna create a new controller. So let's go over here and let's do file. I'm gonna say menu controller.dart. So I wanted to show you a couple more interesting things for GetX state management. Let's create our menu controller. So let's do class menu controller extends GetX controller. And I'm going to show you how to create a state for an entire object. We have our menu object here. It has a name, color, and location. So name, color, location. And we have three different inputs here. So let's go back to the menu controller. And now I want to create a final menu equals. So before with our observables, we had primitive types, but now let's create one for an entire object. So to do that is actually pretty easy. You define the object here, menu, and then you can say .obs, and that's it. So that makes this entire class observable as a whole. So whenever you change anything in the menu object, it'll affect the state here. So let's copy and paste this in here to save some time. Let's do like this, menu controller. And now I'm going to create a few different functions to set the state. So first, I want to set the state of the menu itself. So I'm going to call it a set menu, I guess. And then I want to pass in a menu object, restaurant menu. And then we do it the same way that we did before. We say menu, and then we can pass in that. Oops, restaurant. Okay, pretty simple. So now I want to show you how you would actually update one single variable inside of the menu object. So let's say that we only want to update the name instead of the entire menu. So let's do set menu name, and then I want to pass in the string name. Doing that is actually pretty easy, but it's a different syntax than before. So we can use the menu variable here, but now there's also an update function. So this uses a callback to update the value internally. Okay. So they give you a sample here too. So dot update this person object. You want to update just the name. So let's do that here. I want to update the value. This can be called whatever you want, but it takes this observable. It takes that value and puts it into here. But I'm going to call this menu object. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Menu object. And then we can say dot name. So that's the actual menu name equals name. So that equals this name here that we pass in. And you can do the same thing with the location and the color. If you want to, you can do set menu color, set menu location. I'm actually not going to do that for this video. I'm actually going to leave that up to you. So I can kind of leave the rest of this as an exercise. I have the menu model here. I have the update menu class here. So I'm going to leave that up to you to kind of figure out how you would actually update the state for the name and the color and have that change in the list here. So for the submit button, you can actually submit the entire menu object at once and add that to the menu function call here. Or you can update all three things individually by going here and pressing return, and it should update the actual name here. So if you pass in the name here, it'll only change the name here. It won't affect the color and location. But if you press submit here, it'll pass in all three of these values. I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out how you would do that. One more thing for that also, if you go to the update menu, you would need to actually create your text input controllers for these three things. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now. So I hope this video helped you get started with state management and GetX. It's actually pretty easy and pretty fun. So I might do more videos on GetX in the future too. Yeah, stay tuned for more and happy coding. Bye.